Today we have Karl Donabauer. Did I pronounce it right, Karl?
It's okay.
Karl is an independent database developer. He's an Access MVP, and he's an organizer of Access Developer Conferences. And he is going to talk today about Access and PowerApps, a growing relationship. So go ahead, Karl, take it away.
Yep, I share my screen. Okay, I will share my slides first. Can you see my slides, Marie? Is that okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, then let's start. And let's start quickly because I have a lot of material. So this is me. I'm a developer, MVP from Vienna, Austria. I have a website in German and Italian, and I organize English-speaking Access conferences. So I'm an expert in Access. I'm not an expert in PowerApps. I would say at an intermediate level. Advantage to have me here is that I have the access and database view on PowerApps. Because often when you hear PowerApps experts talk, it's another world, another language, and I hope you will understand me. So what's our plan for today? I will talk about licensing because many people don't understand the licensing because Microsoft makes it so complicated. I will show you a hybrid app and some aspects for the developer, the database use, security, etc. I will do a very short demo of Dataverse and speak some slides about Dataverse, about the structure, etc. Then Juan will chime in and show us something about SQL Server as backend for PowerApps. And I will conclude with a short discussion about the relationship of between Access and PowerApps and us as Access developers. So first thing is licensing. I've stolen this slide here from Chris Huntingford, who works for Microsoft in the UK. And I've done some editing because after 2 months it wasn't up to date, and I also grayed out all the dynamic stuff that doesn't interest today. If you're excited about PowerApps, you have to ask yourself, do I have a Microsoft or Office 365 license that includes PowerApps? If you say no, you have to buy a license, and a Microsoft 365 license that does this. I will show you the licensing guide later. If you say yes, I already have PowerApps, then the next question would be, would you like to use premium connectors like SQL Server, Dataverse, etc.? And there are 3 answers. There's a no. You don't want to use premium connectors. Then it's enough. You don't have to pay anything else than your standard M365 license because it is included in almost all plans. I'll show you later. If you say maybe, then you can have a look at Dataverse for Teams because this is free if you have Microsoft Teams available. And if you say yes, I want to use premium connectors, then you will, and only in this case, you will have to purchase a per app or per user license. So if you have Microsoft 365, you're almost done. I will show you in a minute. There are 2 main sources for the licensing. First, there is a licensing guide by Microsoft. This is a PDF. I'll open it up, and it only has 28 pages. So licensing can become quite complex. I don't want to show you all the 28 pages, just one. I'll go to the very end, to the appendix, and then we go up 1 page. Page 27 is the decisive one, because here we have a list of all the Office 365 plans that include PowerApps. So you may have PowerApps and until now don't know it. It's not only the big plans like E1, E2, E3, the corporate plans, it's even a small business basic plan. Actually, I will show you the demos today in my business basic plan. I have several plans, but I will show it in my business basic. And there's even students and faculty, and I mean, there are hundreds of plans, I think, of Microsoft 365, but more than 20 already include PowerApps, as you can see here. So that's the licensing guide. Next one is the pricing website of Microsoft. There are 2 licenses. There is a per app plan. If only in the case you use premium connectors like SQL Server, Oracle, and so on, I will show a list later, you have to buy a license, an additional license in addition to your Microsoft 365 account. And there are 2 types of licenses, the per app plan. This is your one user, you get 2 apps per month and you pay $10. The second one for $40 means all you can eat per user and per month. For one user, it's $40. And there are the details down below. It's really 2 apps for the per app plan for the $10, and it's unlimited for the $40 per user plan. So that's the licensing thing. Let me go back. Next thing is, I said it depends on the type of connectors you use if you have to buy an additional license. There are 2 types. It's standard licenses and it's premium licenses. And only for the premium licenses, you have to buy one of these 2 plans for $10 or $40. So the standard connectors include Excel, SharePoint, and all these things I mentioned here. This is just some examples. There are about 100 that you can use. And the premium connectors are Dataverse, SQL Server, all the major database servers, but also things like Salesforce, Graph Security, SAP, Stripe, things like that. So for this, only for the premium connectors, you have to buy an additional license, a real license for $10 or $40 per user. And I also included down below here in parentheses the on-premise data gateway. It's not a connector, but it's a software that enables you to connect your local data sources, SQL Server, etc., with PowerApps. And in order to use it, you have to buy a license, one of the 2 licenses. That's why I included it in this column here. There are 2 ways to get PowerApps for free. One is the usual trial account. You get a per user plan, and as always with Microsoft 365, you get only 30 days to test it. But you can test everything, and then after 30 days, all is gone. Now you can copy it over, but it's only 30 days. The second one, I will show you today also, is the community plan. You essentially get a developer environment for single use. That's the major limitation. You cannot share the apps and the data you use there, but you can do almost everything. Use all connectors, Dataverse, etc. There's some limits like 200 MB database, but that's not so important. The major thing is that it's for single use. It's a developer environment. So that was licensing. Are there any questions about licensing so far, Maria? Or did I cover everything?
There was someone that mentioned the community plan before you did, but I think you did a nice job of covering that. And then there's a question from David Peel about how about dynamics and access. I think what he's asking is if you have dynamics, do you automatically have a PowerApps license?
I think it depends on the type of license. The rest of one of the slides was dynamics licensing, but essentially if you want to use premium connectors, you still have to buy a PowerApps license. But it depends a bit because there are many versions of dynamics licenses. So I'm not sure which one covers it and which one not.
Okay, I think that's all the questions currently.
Okay, and I will show you the community plan in a minute or in a few minutes. In practice. So let's do a demo of a hybrid app. I go to my file explorer because there is the access front and it's just an ACCDB. I'll open it up. Let me open the main form just to get you an impression what the front end looks like. I think I will have to log in. Yes, I will log into my Business Basic account to get to the SharePoint data. In this case, SharePoint is the backend. And it's a German UI, don't get disturbed about it. I just want to show you that there's a lot of data in it. This is the real app. I just obfuscated completely the data, invented names, etc. You see a lot of fields, a lot of controls. There are a lot of details because this is the rich client. And it goes to SharePoint data. These are the donors and these are the children. And let me open up 1 or 2. So there's a lot of data about the person, about the child in this case, its age, because the app that I created here is for a charity that supports Indian street children. And so they often don't know their age and they have to estimate the age every year. They have to register if they are present at some checks and what type of school they visit, etc. So this is some of the details of this front end here. They can export to Excel, they can import, etc., etc. They have master data. So it's a small but rich client, I would say. And you should see here that I'm using the orange things here. That's SharePoint. SharePoint table, SharePoint list that I use here as backend. And for the hybrid app, I also use SharePoint as backend for my Power App here. So I go to the Power App environment, to my Microsoft 365 Business Basic account, and if I click on Power Apps down below, I get to my Power Apps environment to make PowerApps.com, and I prepared a small demo app. It's the real app, just again with obfuscated data, completely anonymized, and I go to Edit to go to the development environment of Power Apps and just show you some details, database related, etc. Normally that works in 2 seconds. I think they have a small problem. Let me close it and try it again. So this is the other front end. This is the company that supports these children. Let me just run the application. This is just a part of the rich client, of course. You can see the donors and you can see the children. Here you can filter them, you can change the sorting. It's almost the usual thing you get when you start a new Power App, but there's a lot more programming behind it. So let me open up one of the donors. Then you get some details. You can start an email, right, with a tip from your mobile, because this is exactly what they see on their mobile. You can call them with one tip on your mobile, and you can change the data here. Oops. Yep. And you can have a look at the children they support. In this case, it's only one, and you see the little poor child, sent him some money. And these are the sponsors for this one child, because it's an end-to-end relation. We come to that later. One child can have more sponsors because it needs education and a bed and something to eat, etc. And one donor can support several children, of course. So let me go back to the home screen, and this is the children in the app. And you see the poor little boy here who gets supported by somebody. So it's essentially very close to what I have in the front end, but it's a light client here. You can switch to inactive people because they are old enough to live their own life, etc. Let me do some filtering here. For example, a child that starts with set, you can just filter it here. So these are the usual things you have in an app. So let me go to the environment. What I do use here are things like variables and collections. For example, if we go to the browse screen here and I click on this children, there is an event called onSelect. No, I'm not, this is the right one here. And there happen a lot of things. I can do some formatting here with the code. And it says, well, I want to filter something that starts with what I type in my text. And oh, I see here, there is a problem. It is the red underline means there is a problem with this formula. Let me remove the formatting again, because it's okay to read it in one line still. And what's the problem here? If I don't know this, I have to debug it. And there's something called the app checker up there. And if I click on it, it tells me what is the problem. Are there any problems in my app? And it says, well, there are 2 formulas that have a problem. And I can go exactly to the point where the problem is. In this case, it's the children's screen. And I can tell him, yep, go there. And it says the left value is a Boolean type and the right value is a number type in this case here. And in this red line here, the problem here is not that I made a mistake, but it's a bug in the SharePoint implementation. You can't use a yes and no, a true or false for a SharePoint yes, no field. You have to use 1 and 0, otherwise it doesn't work. So in this case, it's SharePoint or Microsoft's fault and not mine. But the app checker tells me all the problems I have in my app. Another thing I wanted to show you in terms of environment and programming is that you can use variables and collections and things like that. If I go to, yes, this one. If I go to on select the property, when I select a record here, it says, well, build me a collection and take the record that is selected here and fill me a variable, the global variable, the child ID, etc., etc. Let me do this for a moment. I will throw away my filtering here and go away because I want to use a record that has some data behind. I go in here and I close it, and then I can view my variables and I can view my collections here. I go to my variables and it says, well, you filled the global variable for the child ID, and I think you can't read it. It says 1283. It's just the ID value, and it even tells me where I use this variable in my app. So you have some debugging functionality here. And the second thing is I can view my collections. Collections are something like record sets in table memories, in memory tables. So I see the selected record, that I selected all the fields in the selected record in my collection here in my local table, memory table. And there are even subtables like SharePoint saves the author of every record. And if I click on the subtable, well, I'm the author of this record, of course. And it even shows me the picture of my Office 365 account. So you have a lot of things that help you in developing applications here. What I use here as data source, SharePoint tables. The same tables that you saw in the Access frontend. And let me open up, for example, the donor table. If I click here on Edit Data, it opens up SharePoint and shows me the table or the list, the SharePoint list. It's a bit slow today. And if I go to the site contents, it shows me all the lists that I use here. Now you see all the tables. And for example, in the table child, in the list child, I have 1,300 something tables. So 1,400, I have 1,500 almost donors. So this is not very much, but 1,500 records. Maybe you have heard that this isn't possible to have more than a few hundred records in a Power App. Well, that's kind of true, but there is a way around this. If I go to my file here, and if I go to the settings and to the advanced settings, there is a data row limit in the Power Apps of 500 records, but this only applies to non-delegable queries. That means if you use only functions that let the server work and just return you not more than 500 records, everything works. If you use functions where you have to pull all the data to the Power Apps, you are lost. So you have to know what is delegable and what is not delegable. It's almost the same as when you use indexes with Access. You don't pull all the records here to your front end, but just the selection. Then you don't have a problem. I can extend this to 2000. If I use 2001, it says, well, this has to be between 1 and 2000. But 500, the default value, normally is okay. You just have to know what is delegable and what is not. And there's a good documentation of what is not. And there are only 3 backends nowadays for Power Apps that have delegable functions. This is Dataverse, of course, SQL Server, and SharePoint that I use here. And you have to read the documentation in order to know what you can use and what not. The last thing I want to show you in this quick run through is there is even more that helps me in my debugging. I go to this advanced options here and I can open up a monitor session. Takes a second and then I've opened up a monitor session. It's empty so far, but if I go to my app and I do something, let me go back, let me open up another record here. Okay, and then I go back to my monitor session. You see that it fills up with everything that happened, and it's a lot. It traces all the traffic that happens from your app to the data and back. So if I go to get row counts here, I get the details in a JSON format, and it tells me everything. It tells me that I have called the table projects and what I sent it and what I did get back, what I sent and what I did get back. So you really can trace everything that happens in your app, and you even can invite your users. So somebody that uses it on a mobile you can invite him, and you see the monitoring of his data, and so you can debug. It's a real feature also in application lifecycle management. Things like these are included in PowerApps. So this was everything I wanted to show you in a quick run through here. Just a few words more about development in PowerApps. There are about 200 functions included. By the way, there are a lot of links on my slides, and you get the slides, I think tomorrow. Maria will post it on the website of the user group. This is the function reference here. You get variables and collections I showed you shortly, but there are also downsides. It's not a real coding environment, I would say. There are no real loops, for example. You can trick around, you can do some kind of loops, but they're not included really. You don't have a real code editor, and I write here that it's a plus and a minus. It's a minus for us developers. It's a plus when you have to sell Microsoft, like Microsoft sells the Power Apps as low code and no code environment. There are debugging features, as we have seen. I think I showed you the most. Of course, you can also connect to Azure Application Insights and things more like that. In terms of application lifecycle management, you always work in environments when you work with Power Apps. I will show you later a second environment. Basically, it's a container where all your data and your app lives, and you can switch to, for example, from a development environment to a production environment and copy over your data. If you have a Dataverse solution, I mean, you use Dataverse, you can build a package that's called solutions, and this is very rich in terms of what is included of application lifecycle management, etc. If you use a normal app like I did here, you can still export it as a zip or MS app file and import it into a production environment, or the other way around, as you like it. And they constantly extend the possibilities of ALM in Power Apps. For example, the newest thing is that you can export all your source code to GitHub and there use it for sharing it with other developers, source code, control, etc. But it's still in beta. Yes, this is just another link about the ALM basics. Yeah, there, you get usage analytics. So you get a screen where you see who has used on what device, what time, etc., with what system, iPhone or Android, all the usage statistics about your app. And you get an admin center for Power Apps. We don't have the time to show it, but you can configure almost everything. In terms of security, you're working in the Azure AD, Active Directory, all the time here because we are in M365 or in a paid license of Power Apps. It's always the Active Directory of Azure that controls the access. You have to publish and share an app, otherwise nobody sees it and can use it, you as the author or owner of the app. You can share it with the other users in your M365 tenants and with the groups that are in there. And there are three roles. You as the developer are the owner, but you can assign somebody as co-owner and he can develop also in the app. And the normal role is the user role who can handle the data. You also can invite guest users to your app, but they only can use it in the browser, not on the mobile. This limitation, I think it's nowhere documented, but I found it out in practice and then read it on LinkedIn, etc. So this is quite a limitation for guest users. Yeah, this is a link about sharing data. And what about controlling the UI and the data access? There are different things you can do. There are built-in functions like the full name function and the email function. There's even a picture function where you can call and control the name of the current user. And of course, then you can say, well, this user has to see this screen, the other not, this control, he can edit this and that. You also can connect to the Azure AD. You can connect to Microsoft Graph Security, although this is a premium connector here, but you can do it. And if you work with Dataverse, there's a rich model of security roles. It's incredibly rich. You can assign every line to a user and what he can do with this line virtually. But Only this one is still a feature that you can control the data and the access with the full name and the email address of the current user. So, are there any questions about so far about the SharePoint thing? Maria, did you see something important?
Yeah, so I saw several questions here. There was some discussion about Power Automate and SharePoint and the licensing at, but I think that Juan answered those. Power Automate is free if you have an Office 365 license.
Yes, and if you use it for the same data sources, not for premium connectors, of course.
Right, right. And SharePoint is also typically included with Office 365 license.
Yes, that's why I use it here, because it's no additional cost for the charity where they use it. They just need, in their case, it's even free because there is a charity version of Office 365, but they would need an account, as I showed it here, for $6 a month. That would be enough for SharePoint and for PowerApps.
Yeah, there was also some discussion about Power Automate. A reminder from Cheryl that Power Automate used to be called Flow. So if you're not up to date on some of the new naming conventions or renames. Also, we've been talking about Dataverse. That used to be called CDS or Common Data Service.
You will see it on my next slides.
Okay, good. There's
Cheryl, Maria.
Crystal, sorry. There's also a note here from Philip that there are many connectors within Power Automate that do require dedicated licensing. So make sure you watch for that.
In the PDF I showed you, there's also many pages about PowerApps licensing, and you will get the link.
Right, right. And then the other discussion here was about, since you showed a mobile app, whether or not that could be used on the desktop or whether it will switch. And there is some responsiveness built in, but there is also two formats up front and you decide which one you want. Did you want to expand on that at all, or?
I think it's too long. We would need another hour just to show all these things, the form factors, etc. I think I should continue
Sure.
with Dataverse.
Okay, go ahead.
And I'll do a quick demo about Dataverse. I mean, we would need 6 days, and I've scheduled 6 minutes to show you Dataverse. So let me start quickly. I close my SharePoint environment here. I close the monitor, I close the site contents. Okay, so I'm done with my SharePoint demo, and one thing I mentioned is environments. So this is my default environment. This is the thing you get with the €5, $6 account in your M365, but I also applied for the community license. And this means you get another environment, and this is the community license environment that you get if you apply for a free community license. And I would switch to that. Maybe first I show you, if I go to data here, and if I go to tables, in my default environment, there is nothing. But if I go to my community plan, so I'm now in a different environment, different apps, different data. And if I go to tables here, then you will see a plethora of tables, because here I have Dataverse. I have to switch to all tables because there are different views. And now you see what you get for free delivered with Dataverse, hundreds of tables. This is based on the common data model, but I will just show you 2 tables that I created on my own. This is, if you switch to the custom view, I have created 2 tables, companies and employees, just a simple example. If I go to the companies table, I have created just 3 fields or so, just to show you how it works, because I will talk more about the structure of Dataverse and not how do you do it, because this will take us several hours. I can add columns here, and I can add columns of different data types, of course. So it's the usual types, but it's also email, phone, time zone. There's even image, and there's a customer type of field, because it's a rich data model behind Dataverse. And so I could add other columns, but I just want to show you a relationship that I created here, because it's often a question, can you create and how do you create relationships in Dataverse? I go to the employees table because employees work for a company, of course. So there is a relation between employees and company. And if I click on the company field in the employee table here, I hope you can see, because I can't use my zooming tool. It doesn't work in WebEx. Again, the problem. It's a lookup data type, and you have to say what is the related table. In this case, it's table companies. You will see it better in the next screen. So you just create a lookup table, tell it what is the related table, and it creates the relationship in the background. But let me switch to the relationships view, because these menu here, it's just visible if you use Dataverse. Well, the relationship I created is this one here, employee and company. And if I open it up, you see that it's many to one relationship, one company, many employees. And here in the advanced options, I could say in strange names, if I want to do cascade, update, and delete, essentially. So you can do all the things you are used to with relationships. The other things here are, you can do views, you can do forms, you can watch your data, etc. This is essentially for model-driven applications, not for Canvas apps that we do here. But you can do a lot of things more with Dataverse, but we are here more in the dynamics area, and we don't have the time to show it today. It's very interesting. It's really a rich environment, but we don't have much time. What else did I? Yeah, of course, the app. And if you have created your tables here, you can use them in an app, as I showed you with SharePoint. Let me go to the apps. These are just sample apps, model-driven apps that you get for free with Dataverse if you say, I want to have the sample data. And let me go to edit here to show you a very simple small app, just to show you that you really can use the tables that you create in Dataverse naturally, and how you do it. Come on. Okay. I just created a very simple thing here. Let me run it. I said there are 3 companies and there's the data of the company, and if I choose Siemens, for example, I get the Siemens. If I choose Sony, and if I say, well, Siemens doesn't have 17,000 but 170,000 employees, and submit it, then it gets saved in my Dataverse table. I switch back and forth and 170,000 is still there. So I essentially use my Dataverse table here, and I can show you this. These are the Dataverse tables, and I could use all the tables that you saw in the screen before, and all the tables that are created. So this is essentially how you use Dataverse in practice. Let me switch over to explain something of the structure, etc. of Dataverse. In former times, until 3 months ago or so, Dataverse was called Common Data Service, and I stole this slide from an Ignite session and to show you the structure of Dataverse, because often you read, well, Dataverse is something like a relational database. That's very simplistic to say it like this. It's a data service that has all these layers inside. It's even more complicated than on this slide. Well, there is an API, and everything, all front ends, etc., all programming goes through the API here. It's OData. It's a web service that uses OData, and with the OData you go into these layers. There's a security layer first, of course, for authentication, etc. There is a logic layer because you can define, for example, business rules in your application. The next layer is a data layer for reporting, for data validation, and the common data model I mentioned a few times. All these tables are based on the common data model. Would lead too far here. But the storage layer is very interesting. It says relational databases. Essentially, it's SQL Server that is used here. But there are also files that get stored on other Azure things like blobs and log files, and even data lake can be involved, the big data thing of Microsoft in Azure. And there's an integration layer for data exports, etc. So it's a very complicated data service in the background, but it is hidden from the user. You have seen that I can define tables and fields, and I don't see anything of this complexity here. It's all hidden. Next one is about performance. I also stole it again from a Microsoft blog. How does it work when your front end sends something to your back end. So here there's an OData request, and there's an API layer, a connector layer, and then I'm at the data source, SharePoint, SQL Server, etc. The data source gives me the data, and it goes back through the connector, through the API layer, and then I'm back in the front end. And this is the elapsed time. So there are several layers, and almost the same is the case if you use the data gateway. You can go to your local data with the data gateway, and it's the same principle. There's just another layer, the data gateway itself. And for example, SQL Server gives you back through the data gateway, through the connector, through the API management, and travels back to the front end. And this is the elapsed time again. So what about Dataverse or CDS, Common Data Service? There are no layers between. That's why it's called the native data source. The front end sends the OData request to Dataverse, and the data travels back. That's it. That's because why the performance is better with Dataverse, of course. There's also a new flavor of Dataverse, Dataverse for Teams. We don't have the time to show it today, but you have it if you have Teams. There's no additional cost. There are some limitations. The worst limitation is that the apps are only accessible inside of your Teams and inside of Teams Mobile. You can't share it outside. And the second one is that your dev environment and also some data types are reduced. So it's a bit different, but essentially you get Dataverse for free if you have Teams. And this is instruction and information links about how to use it in Teams Dataverse. Well, and now Juan Soto should chime in.
Thank you, Karl, very much. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And let's get this going on the road. All right, so I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about how we're using the Teams app that Karl just mentioned, PowerApps, to help us at the IT Impact. We have employees on 3 continents and customers around the world, and it was important for us. It's important for us to be able to help out when the developer is not available. So if the customer calls and they say, oh, our systems are down and the primary developer is away or not available, somebody can step in. Well, they need to know how to connect with VPN. They need to know who the primary contacts are. They need to know where to get stuff. And so we created this app called Client Info in Teams because every customer has a channel under the active projects team. So if you were to look at our teams, I can't show it to you because it's proprietary, but in our teams, we have a team called active projects, and then underneath that we have channels for each active project. And this app called Client Info lives under that team called active projects. So I can't show it to you, but when you click on the channel, it actually shows you just that customer's information. But you can also run the app by itself. In that case, you would see all the customers here on the left-hand side here if I were to clear this out, this filter, clear it out. This is a very simple app. It's using Dataverse to store the data. And so we've got view contacts where I can see the contacts associated with the customer. I don't have any contacts this moment because it's an internal app. I can see connection information, and then I can see any notes associated with that app. So it's just a very simple app that we use to keep track. This was quite easy for us to spin up. And in fact, you'll notice if you're an X developer, developing Power Apps can be a little intuitive because it's drag and drop and be able to resize things. But the challenge that we had with this was, how do we get it to show just that customer's information when we're in that channel? And so we actually engaged with a Power App MVP and hired him to help us with this app and get it going. The other aspect of this is we also have a bot that we call the tracker bot, which the icon is over here on the side. And this tracker bot interfaces with a SQL Server database in Azure to bring back information regarding how many hours we have left over on a project, right? So when we saw a project to a client and that's 40 hours of development work, every day the developer reports back how many hours is consumed so that the PM and the management team here can then check, okay, we have only so many hours left on that project. In order to do that, we have a county using an Access front end that's posting the data to Azure and the SQL Server database in Azure. And then we have the tracker bot, the bot and Teams that's reading that data in SQL Server and be able to bring it back and show the user the information. Now, one of the challenges when you do that is, again, what Karl mentioned, you got to pay $10 a month for the Power App license, and then you got to pay for the premium connector, which is another $10. Now, we were able to bypass all that because we got advice from the PowerApps MVP, and the way he advised us how to do this is to create a service account. In this case, we call it the IT Impact Service Account. And we assign that service account one license for PowerApps at $10 a month. And then what happens is that our developers, or any of our developers, can then log in with that service account, create the Power App, connect with the SQL Server in the cloud, which is in the premium connector, and then assign that Power App to a particular team. Because remember, when you assign the Power App, it's by team. So in this case, we assigned it to the active projects team I mentioned earlier. And then we allow rights to everyone in the organization. So no matter where the employee is located in the world, they can use this bot to ask questions of it and find out what information they need to. So it turned out to be really great because it only ended up costing us $10 a month for the Power App license, and another $10 for premium, for $20 a month. Why is this important? Because most of the people on here who are consultants, like Maria and Karl and myself, we deal with small businesses, right, that have 15, 20 users, 100 users. And when you've got 20 users and you want to pay $10 a month for a Power App, which is what Microsoft would love you to do, that's $200 a month, not including another $200 for the SQL Server Premium Connector. So this strategy of creating a service account is going to allow you to be able to help the client just pay a minimum and be able to access the benefits. Now, there is an important difference here in that this $10 a month only gives you 2 apps. So if they're rolling out more than that, then you need to upgrade to the $40 a month, which gives you unlimited apps, but you're still using one service account. And so I just wanted to bring that to collation to you guys, how that works. Any questions regarding how to set this up? Regarding the Power Apps outside teams and the SQL Server Premium Connector? Maria, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, no one specifically made any comments. I invite you to either unmute and ask questions or type a question specific to this approach for Juan. There is a comment just now that there should be an affordable plan for Power Apps from Microsoft. Believe me, you're not alone in that thought. We might get there, who knows?
I mean, there is an affordable plan, which is the Power Apps for Teams, which is free. So if you have an Office 365 account, you get Teams for free, and now you can do Power Apps. So I suggest you start with that and using Dataverse, which is also free. There is a 2 GB limit, which is the same thing as Access. So you're not going to be able to store millions of records in there, but it's a start.
Another question, is the service account concept explicitly allowed by Microsoft licensing?
Wow, that's a great comment.
I wondered about that myself, actually.
Yes. Obviously, Microsoft wants you to pay for every employee using the app, but since the person who's logging in is the service account, and they allow you to publish the app to the organization so other users can use it, right? So only one person can program it. Turns out that's an account that anybody can log into to program it. We use Microsoft Edge here, and Microsoft Edge has a wonderful capability to give you profiles, so you can have multiple sessions open of Edge. So typically what happens is I'm logged into the IT Impact Azure account in Edge, and then I'll have another profile in Edge that's logged into the service account. So I can actually have both browsers open and they're not colliding with permissions or anything like that. So I encourage you to do that in terms of using Edge profiles. Really wonderful.
All right, I think we probably better give Karl back the floor here so he can finish on time. Maybe Juan, you can look at the chat because I think there was one or two more questions.
Okay.
I share my screen for 2 more slides, then I'm done and we can talk about Dataverse and the things I show you on the last slides here. One is, how do you learn about Power Apps? It all is online. That's the first thing. You don't have books that are up to date. You have to go online to learn it. So there is the Microsoft documentation, which is really good and has a lot of learning resources. Even better is the PowerApps community. It's a huge forum and a lot of samples, etc., where you get answered almost every question. Then this is a course I took, and I'm the first one who completed it because it consists of 240 videos. It's unbelievable. It's more than 30 hours of Canvas Power Apps fundamentals, and it goes relatively deep. It's from Rory Neary's a British MVP. Yeah, this is the link. You get it for free if you really want to have a solid basis of Power Apps. And all the rest almost is YouTube videos by Power Platform MVPs. I just mentioned some usual suspects here, and these links directly guide you to the YouTube channels. There are thousands of videos out there, and these three are some of the best. There are more, of course, but these are the usual suspects if you want to stay up to date and really want to go deep with Power Apps. The last thing is the most important one for us, I think, because it goes about what about Access and Power Apps? What's the relationship? In my point of view, there are two aspects. It's competition and it's complementation. If we talk about competition, I think Access is nowhere present in schools for students. So the young people, the novice developers, they see Power Apps. There is the marketing. The citizen developers, in former times they were called power users. Now they are citizen developers. That's the audience for low-code, no-code development. First, I thought maybe this is just a marketing gag by Microsoft, but if you dive deeper to the Power Apps community, you really meet them, the citizen developers, people who don't have a programming background. And in former times, they saw Access. They came from Excel, saw Access and used it. Some of them still do, but many, many people see Power Apps and the online world. In addition, if someone needs a thin client, not a fat, a rich client as we do it often with Access, he will go to Power Apps. If they need mobile and tablet clients, they will go to Power Apps because it's difficult for us Access people to service them with something that is mobile or on the web. You can do it, but it's so much easier with a Power App if it's not too complicated, not too rich client. And if they want to use modern features, it's still Power Apps, AI, geospatial, photo, video, all the multimedia thing, and also the connectors. There is Power Query in the background. There is this rich world of connectors, some hundreds of connectors. And if you think what we have in Access, it's a big difference. If somebody wants to use all these connectors, he will go to Power Apps. So there is a real competition in the small client, in the web client and mobile client part that I see because it's difficult for us to service them. But there is still a huge amount of complementation I see. This is what I showed you with the SharePoint app. This was the first app I did for a client, but I have 3 or 4 inquiries for the next apps. They have rich Access clients. They want to do something mobile when they go to the client. When they are in their car, they want to have a quick look at something. It's not the huge, rich thing they want to have, just a part, a table, 2 tables, 3 tables that they want to have represented on their mobile. So there's a huge market I see for hybrid apps because there are millions of Access applications out there and they get created and created also new and for richer things. In the moment, it's often done with SharePoint and SQL Azure because these two can also connect to Access. The other way around. Access can connect to SharePoint and to SQL Azure. And also the Power Apps can connect to SharePoint and SQL Azure. For SharePoint, there's even, as you saw, just a few dollars for a Microsoft 365 account and you're done with SharePoint if you know how to deal with it and with its limitations. For SQL Azure, you need an Azure account for SQL Azure. And the next one should be Dataverse. The Access team has announced a Dataverse connector for June 2021. We'll see if they keep it in time. This is a link to the Access roadmap. And if we get a Dataverse connector, this is another chance for hybrid apps because if we can link to Dataverse from Access, there's a chance for more apps in this direction. But what I fear is that maybe, it's not yet announced, this could become a premium connector again, a premium connector in terms of access, because they've built other connectors for Dynamics and what was the other one for this American thing here? They only made it available for the e-licenses. I hope they will make it more popular and give it to every Access user, because for the other ones that are only available in the e-licenses, I've never met any single developer who uses it. So for Access, it would be good if anybody could use the Dataverse connector. We'll see. And last but not least, what about us Access developers? I think if you learn PowerApps, it's a really good thing to extend and modernize your tool set. You need some weeks, you need a course like I have done it, maybe not 200 videos, but several videos, I've done more than this, to get a certain level of expertise and to really are able to do practical things. But you can extend your Access knowledge, your database knowledge with PowerApps. I believe in this. And now I'm done. Thanks. Any questions left in the last 3 minutes, Maria?
Okay, well, I want to go ahead and share my screen too and make a brief plug for a couple things on our Access user groups. So the first thing is, this is the AccessUserGroups.org webpage. I want to point out a new tool we have here. It just came out, I believe, this last month. If you click on that, there's a SQL converter, Access SQL to T-SQL, and then there's also a VBA version of both of those. So please try that out. Juan's group has really worked hard on putting that together, and it's free.
And there's a
Also,
blog post there. If you click on the blog there, there's a blog post that explains how to use the tool.
this is on the main blog.
Yes. It's the first article, I believe.
There we go.
There.
Introducing access to T-SQL converter. And then if you go under the Lunchtime group, you will notice that we have maybe in our events calendar, I wanted to just mention the next event, which is the 23rd of February. Crystal and I will be doing part 2 of general tips and tricks for the beginning Access developer. There is going to be no meeting in March because that's actually during the MVP conference. So I'm going to postpone that. And then I do have a potential May. We'll see about that. And then what you will be waiting for after this, if you click on the Lunchtime blog, I will create a new blog post as soon as Karl gets his slides available, and I'll post a link to those slides on here. And then when Crystal does the video of the recording, which can take a couple weeks sometimes, and we'll put it on YouTube. There'll also be a link on our videos. There'll be another link to the presentation slides from there. But if you don't want to wait 2 whole weeks or however long it takes for those and want them later today or sometime tomorrow, go to the blog and look for a blog post. So with that, we are at 1 o'clock, but if Karl has time and wants to take some questions, I'm open for a few more minutes here at least. Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to do that.
While we're waiting, I just want to do a quick plug on my meetings next month. We have Access Latino America, which is started last month with this month with Access with SQL Server Academy in Spanish. So if you want to join us for that, that'd be great. You can see the information at AccessUserGroups.org. And then in March, I have a very special guest, Evo, Program Manager for Microsoft Access, will be joining us at the Access to SQL Server, which is on the second Tuesday of March. Stay tuned for more information that we're going to talk about integrating Access with Dataverse, which is some exciting developments there. So hopefully we can make some breaking news in March for you guys.
Hey, Karl, this is Andy.
Andy.
How are you? Have you had any issues with watching some of the videos in the course that has, over 100 videos where the in PowerApps? Yeah, where the changes in PowerApps have made it so that You know, you try to do something in the video and it didn't work?
Not really. The poor guy always has to change the names of his videos because they changed the commentator service. They pulled in new features, etc. They do it on a weekly basis. You have a new feature
Right.
every week.
So he's just updating it as he goes? As
Yeah,
it goes?
yeah.
Oh, that's great.
He adds new videos, and I'm the only one who has done them all.
I'll try and be number 2.
That's terrific. I've gone through lots of the Microsoft Learn sections that they have, and some of those, when I did those a year or so ago, they were already, some of them were outdated and they were quite
Right.
confusing for
Right.
me.
Yeah. Yes, you have to go to YouTube to the guys I mentioned and to, yeah,
We
essentially
may need to do we may need to do an intervention with Karl. He needs a life. He does.
I did it in the night in the kitchen table. You know.
Yes. Well, the pandemic probably affected that too.
It's 35 hours or so of video.
Love Andy's background, by the way. I don't know what that is in the background though, but he's got something behind him. I gotta run, guys. Thank you very much, Maria, for setting this up. See you, Andy, Karl.
Yes, thank you so much, Karl. This was a terrific presentation. I'll try to copy the chat notes for you, but there is lots of thanks, etc. A wonderful job, etc. Things like that as well. And that way, then if I hopefully get this copied before I end the meeting, you'll have a list in case we miss anything or didn't address it that you're welcome to comment on. We did have about 48 users or participants rather at the maximum. So that's pretty good. Good job.
Is it a new record or not?
No, I don't think it's a new record, but I think it's fairly close. I think in some of Juan's SQL sessions, he's gotten more than that, but I can take a look. There's a bar indicator in WebEx that will tell you, how many at each meeting.
Thank you for setting this up and for having me, Maria.
Yes, well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. I learned something new about the degree and all the tools and the relationships for Dataverse. I was not aware of all that behind there. So
We could do a session about, I think,
that
about
alone.
a dozen of these things, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe there will be time when there is really an access connector to Dataverse. This could be the time.
Right. I think explore more details about the different things. I think this was an awesome start, though. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So bye. See you.
Bye. Mm-hmm.